Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, a monster recruiting weekend for this USC program. Want to dive into some of my favorite players who are going to be on campus for USC and talk about where USC is going on the recruiting trail. I spent a large part of my Friday night and Saturday morning diving into a lot of film on a lot of different players. Excited to get into some of my favorite names USC is hosting this weekend. Before we get into, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the USC fans. Y'all know I love talking the recruiting trail. You guys know I love talking this USC program. But most importantly, the amount of support the USC fans show the boys, all the fight-ons in the comments section, that stuff, it means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. If we do get any commitments coming out of the weekend, we certainly will be diving into the film and breaking it down. And more importantly for the USC fans, and I asked you guys to do this last weekend, and I got a ton of names. Would love to hear some of your favorite names that are on campus for USC as well. Maybe I haven't gotten enough film on some of those guys. And you guys consistently give me some phenomenal high school players to check out. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And there are a lot of different directions that you could go when you're talking about this official visit weekend for USC. I believe the number is 19 players on campus for USC. I specifically wanted to dive into the front seven defenders. You're seeing a clear emphasis from Lincoln Riley, from Danton Lynn, from Coach Entz, from Coach Henderson to really just get a ton of bodies on campus in the front seven. I want to start first at the linebacker spot, and it is becoming very apparent what kind of linebacker Matt Entz and Danton Lynn are really valuing on the recruiting trail. And those are the athletic, rangy linebackers. And I couldn't agree more with that process. You look at some of these linebackers, they're all really good athletes. They can go sideline to sideline. They can operate in space. And yes, in some instances, do they need to put on some weight? They certainly do. I'd rather take a linebacker and put 15 pounds on him, but they have that athleticism already there, as opposed to taking a really big linebacker that struggles to function in space. You look at the modern era of college football, so many offenses are trying to use every blade of the grass on the field, are trying to attack linebackers in space. The best way to counter that, the best way to compete against those offenses are having linebackers that can operate in space or in top tier athletes. And you look at the linebackers that USC is going after, they're just freak show athletes. And my favorite linebacker that's on USC's board, and quite frankly, might be my favorite linebacker in this 2025 cycle, four-star linebacker from California, Noah McCallum. It's coming down to Oregon, Texas A&M, USC, and I think USC is right in the thick of it for a guy in Noah. Why I love Noah McCallum so much, he is probably the smoothest instinctual linebacker that you see in the 2025 class. And yes, he has phenomenal athleticism. We'll get into that. But you talk about a linebacker that between the ears just seems to understand the sport at an extremely high level. That's Noah McCallum. You take a look at the numbers, 166 tackles his junior year, 15 tackles for a loss at 6'3", 225 pounds. He is very, very smooth, dropping back in coverage, playing those zones, reading quarterbacks' eyes, getting his hands on footballs. And that's something that you don't see a ton of linebackers from the high school ranks really carry to the college level. And you look at a guy like Tackett Curtis for USC last year from a physical trait standpoint, and Tackett Curtis checked every single box. We couldn't have asked for a more athletic linebacker than Tackett Curtis. What did he really struggle with? It was the IQ. It was between the ears. It was finding the football, being in your right run fits. He struggled so bad at that, it didn't really matter about the athleticism because he just was never at the right spot at the right time. You look at Noah McCallum and say, this is a very good athlete. Again, don't get me wrong. This is a guy that plays running back, wide receiver, linebacker, and he plays all those three of those positions for a reason. He's a phenomenal athlete. But he finds the football so well. He navigates traffic so well. He drops back in coverage in those zones so well. And when you find a linebacker that puts it together from an IQ and physical trait standpoint, those are the special ones. I think this is a multi-year starter at the linebacker spot, kind of the heartbeat of your defense at the college level. My favorite linebacker for this USC program. Now, the next linebacker USC really going after from the state of Texas, Riley Pettijohn. And this is a freak show linebacker from an athleticism standpoint, and about as violent of a linebacker that you'll see in this 2025 class. He closes the distance in ball carriers exceptionally well. This is a guy that can go sideline to sideline, can play downhill. And when it comes to playing physically at the point of attack, yes, he is undersized right now for a linebacker at 6'2", 205. He does not lack any sort of play strength or physicality. I don't think he is as smooth and as, I think, polished as a guy like Noah McHale, but I think there's a strong argument that he's a better athlete than Noah McHale. But both of these linebackers, they're premier athletes. They can go sideline to sideline. They play extremely fast. And again, you're getting a vision of what kind of linebackers USC is going after, right? Jonah Williams, I think, is going to play linebacker at the college level. Another one of those examples of a hyper athletic linebacker that can play in space. You look at the 2024 cycle, guys like Desmond Stevens, Elijah Newby, very similar kind of linebackers. And I'm a massive fan of it. The last linebacker I want to talk about from the state of Georgia, really interesting one, in Christian Gass, a guy that I certainly could see playing the edge role as well. He's up to 6'4", 220 pounds, a guy that's really long. I mean, when you're asking him to drop back in coverage, he can use that length extremely well to get his hands on footballs. He can operate in space. I don't think the premier athlete that you're looking at with Noah McHale and Riley Pettijohn, and I think that's why he's closer to that 3-star linebacker ranking, but another guy that you like what he can do, dropping back in coverage, getting hands on footballs, carrying tight ends up the seam, because he really does have that nice frame that you're looking for from a linebacker. Noah McHale, Riley Pettijohn, and Jonah Williams, quite frankly, are my top choices for this USC linebacker cycle. That being said, a guy like Christian Gass, I would be thrilled to see him join this USC program. I think he'll probably need a year within the program, but another guy that just kind of shows you where USC is going at the linebacker spot. And the next position I want to talk about is on the inside of the defensive line. It's obviously been a massive talking point for USC, and we saw it is difficult to grab those kind of bodies in the transfer portal, which I think it makes it imperative that you get guys that can play the inside of the defensive line from the high school ranks. Auburn commit Malik Autry is one of my favorite guys. And you look at Malik Autry and what makes him special. This is 6'5.5", 320 pounds. He can play that nose, that right over the center, can do the dirty work, eat up double teams, kind of be that disruptive force, let your linebackers play downhill. What makes him special is at that size, his athleticism, the nimble feet, the juice off the line of scrimmage. He can be a game wrecker as well that gets into the backfield. And again, it's really hard to find guys that can do the dirty work, take on double teams, let other players play fast and downhill, but also have guys that can give you pass rush juice and create negative plays. Malik Autry is one of those guys. He can play the zero. He can play the 3 tech because of how athletic he is. I think 24/7 Sports with their eval is right on. I think this is a 5-star caliber defensive lineman. There's a reason every SEC program is going after this kid from Alabama. If USC can go back again to the Southeast and grab another stud from the states of Georgia, Alabama, that's going to be massive for this USC program. They did it last cycle with Cam Fountain. They have Justice Terry and Gibson committed in this 2025 cycle. I would love to see this one get done. I think he's a multi-year starter for USC and a very, very high ceiling in terms of All-American, All-Conference, first-round NFL draft pick. Last guy I want to talk about, and I got 2 other guys I want to talk about. I threw in another name because he's one of my favorite players. Floyd Boucard. And this is kind of a wild story. This kid grew up in Canada, moved to Alabama, played hockey as a kid. And I think there's a certain point where it's like, all right, you're 6'3", 300 plus pounds. We got to get you off the ice onto a football field. He goes to the state of Alabama to play his junior year, low-level ball at Alabama. The numbers are insane. 85 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. The film certainly checks out. This was a guy that was unblockable at the lower level of high school ball. Now he's going into his senior year. He's transferring to Miami Central, one of the best programs across the country. I would love to see USC get on this kid early because I think he's going to turn a lot of heads in the fall. I think a lot of programs are waiting to see what Floyd Boucard can do when he gets the highest level of high school ball, I think he's going to shoot up the rankings. I think there's a really good chance that he ends this process as a 4-star prospect. If USC can get on this kid early, bring him to USC, I think this is an extremely high upside defensive lineman that has just kind of some freak show athleticism for that size, really raw, doesn't really use his hands much. He just kind of relies on being the better athlete and being the more powerful athlete at the high school level. He's a project for Coach Henderson and this defensive staff, but a guy that if you do get it out of him, I think can be a really, really high caliber player. And the last guy I want to talk about, and the only offensive player we're going to talk about today, is wide receiver Andrew Marsh. It sounds like USC has a really good shot at this kid. Over 1,000 yards his junior year. You look at Andrew Marsh, and he doesn't have the crazy track times. He does have a track background, and he's fast, but it's not the crazy track times that you see some other wide receivers at the high school ranks have. You turn on the film, and we kind of said this the other day, Jordan Addison vibes, Amon-Ra St. Brown vibes, the vibes of a wide receiver that is not necessarily going to stand out from a physical traits perspective, but the movement skills, how well he can get in and out of his breaks, vary his speeds, create separation within his routes. That's what's special. And I think that is what you're valuing when you get to the collegiate and NFL level. I don't think it's a coincidence that guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown have emerged as some of the better wide receivers at the NFL level because they understand the sport. I look at Andrew Marsh and say, 6'1", 173, he can operate after the catch. He's good at the catch point, checks off a lot of boxes, but what he really excels at is creating separation. I think this is a very, very talented wide receiver, top 100 national prospect for a reason. Would love to see USC get that one done. Now, you have guys like Julian Lewis on campus, a ton of offensive prospects. We'll continue to talk about those names as it plays out. Wanted to highlight some of my favorite players, specifically in the front seven. We got the USC commitment sweatshirt on for some good vibes. Hopefully we get to talk about some commitments in the next couple of days. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. We'll close it on that. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.